Drew, I want to start with a little something personal. I got Kevin Weeks here.
Yeah.
You played against him, I guess, in junior. Now, just for the viewers out here, first of all, Memorial Cup champion you were at Sault Ste. Marie, so congratulations. You were part of Team Canada World Junior Champions in '94. Congratulations, gold medal. Those are some pretty high honors, especially as a young person. But more importantly, you got to play against Kevin Weeks in the OHL. What was that like?
Well, I would imagine he was having nightmares last night of coming on and seeing that red and white there in that old Owen Sound rink. Yeah, it was. No, you know what? It was good. Like, you know what? The rivalry between Owen Sound and the Sioux was really. We seem to always match up, and it's weird. Like, even when I went back and I coached the Sioux, it was like, geez, we had to go down to Owen Sound again and play in that rink. It was like it seemed to be like every first round we matched up. And you know, whether it was, Jamie Storr was there at the time too, and it was Kevin, probably the best tandem in the Ontario Hockey League at that time. But always a really good rivalry. Tough, real tough place to play. Real tough place to play. Still is. It's a tough place to play on some.
As was the Sioux too, and you guys were always stacked. You guys had a lot of yourselves that went on to play in the show as well.
Yeah. I think we had my year that I was drafted in the junior, I think we had going into that NHL draft year with our group, we had nine or 11 guys that were drafted in the NHL that year. Obviously, they did a heck of a job. Whether it was Sherry Baston at the time was the general manager. So they had a couple of real good years of draft, which really kind of led into the success we had in the Sioux for 4 years. Like we obviously won the 1 year, but it took us 3 years to get to that point. You know, the first year we lost in Quebec City, didn't have a great tournament. Second year we lost in the finals against Kamloops in Seattle, and then won the rights to the Memorial Cup, which we held in the Sioux, and then we ended up beating Peterborough in the Sioux. And then the following year, which was our last year, I think we lost in the finals of our conference to I think it was Detroit. Who went on to the Memorial Cup that year.
Hey, Drew, I got one more for you about your kind of coming, into the NHL. I mean, you had that great run in junior, and then you get drafted in the first ever draft by the Tampa Bay Lightning. You were a second-round pick, 26th overall, so a little different at that time. Weren't as many teams as there are today. They took Roman Hamrlik with the first pick, and they took Brent Gretzky. People might know that name with the third pick. But what do you remember about being drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning, who just didn't even had not even played a game when you were drafted?
Well, it's funny you ask about that, but at the time it was Phil and Tony Esposito were the GMs and assistant GMs. And Angelo Bambaco was somebody in the Sioux who was one of their scouts, again, longtime friend of the Espositos, and seemed to always be around the rink, always asking me questions. Never met with Tampa leading up to the draft, but I guess they did a lot of inside work coherently, I guess, a little bit, just to kind of pick my brain about who I'd been talking to. Obviously, they got to see me a lot, being with them being there in the Sioux and catching me on the road. But, Roman, myself, there was a couple other Sioux guys. I think Aaron Gavey was drafted.
Yeah, Gavey
was
there.
At that time.
He was fourth.
Tommy McDonald was a little bit later. Jeff Toms was drafted to New Jersey, but they flipped him in a trade to get him. So I think there was 4 or 5 of us that year that were drafted to Tampa.
Plus Kluche ended up coming over, and Kluche and I played together in Tampa as well. Dan Kluche was a really good goalie, good partner, went on to have a very good NHL career as well. So here's something that's interesting. We just talked to, same thing. You and I played against each other since we were kids, really. And it's interesting, again, how everybody has their own path in the game. And at what point for you did it start clicking like, hey, I really would like to become an NHL head coach, or I really aspire to become a head coach? What time in your career did that start to take hold for you?
To be honest with you, Kevin, it was probably in the latter parts of my career, probably, in my 15th year, I think, when I was pro. I really started, I think my last year would have been in North America. It was in 2010 in Binghamton. And I didn't have a contract going into the summer, early into the fall. At that time and before that, I was doing a lot of lot of stuff in Northern Ontario and Sudbury, where I grew up, with the minor hockey associations, U17 or U15 at the time, the program was. So it was a lot of volunteer work that I did. And then I did, like they had level 1 going on in the spring or in the fall, that I took. I finally got a job over in the UK, which ended up being a player coach job with Sylvain Cloutier, Danny's brother. Went over and really enjoyed my time over there. Came back in the summertime. I wanted to get my high performance 1 through Hockey Canada, so I went through that process. Started doing that. Went back to the UK. Took over the team in Braehead, Scotland, as player coach. Finished my high performance 2. Came back that next summer with all intentions of going back and playing and coaching. Started my high performance 2. Put a couple feelers out to junior teams. Didn't really get quite honestly, a lot of feedback for callbacks or emails until I finally got a call from Dale DeGray in Owen Sound, and him and Greg Ireland wanted to meet me. So I drove down to CGI and Dale. We had coffee in Barrie. Had a great meeting, and quite honestly, like 2 days later, they offered me the assistant coach in Owen Sound, and I retired from playing and got into coaching and spent 3 years in Owen Sound. Just loved my time there. Loved the ownership. Really enjoyed working for Dale and GI. Learned a lot. And really started to kind of involve myself in Hockey Canada. My last year in Owen Sound, I took over the U15 team that went to the Canada Winter Games out in Prince George, and we won a gold medal out there. And then interviewed for the Sioux job right before the draft, and got a call, shortly after, from Kyle Raftis to come down to the Sioux. I was at my cottage on the Manitoulin Island, so I drove up there, sat down with Kyle and the rest of the group there. The ownership group which was pretty much still intact from when I played, so there was a lot of familiar faces. Met with them for about an hour, and walked out and went back over to the Gardens and sat down with Kyle and was offered the job. And that was my first opportunity to go back as a head coach to where I was drafted in junior. So it was an exciting time for me and my family, and that's where it kind of started off, and spent 3 great years in the Sioux with some real good hockey teams and developed some real good players that are on playing in the NHL, and then have the opportunity to come to St. Louis, and work with their American Hockey League team, which was in Springfield for the first 2 years before COVID had hit. And then we went to, San Antonio, and then we went to Springfield.
Yeah. Hey, I want to ask you about your team this year, because I'm bullish. Kevin and I are both bullish on the Blues. I had to fight with Dan Rosen earlier in the week or last week, because I like your team this year. I think you guys have a chance to really make a step forward. I want to ask you, you're a former defenseman. You get Philip Broberg. Kevin, I'm not going to speak for you here, but I was really impressed with Broberg in that final series. We got to do the games together. I thought he was a real good player. Doug Armstrong comes in, offer sheet, you guys get him. What are your impressions of young Philip Broberg? Because I think he's got a chance to take off.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was, from my vantage point, I didn't get a ton of time to watch him when he was in the American League East and himself being in the West. But obviously, the playoffs that he had when he came in under the circumstances was really impressed. I thought he played outstanding. For us, it was just exciting to get somebody in with that kind of size, that kind of skating ability. And then once you get to know the player a little bit more, just his habits, details in his game, his physicality, the way he can skate and move pucks, and it really, like what we've been seeing from day one in training camp is someone that we're really excited about. And he's played some real good hockey for us here through camp and through the first 3 games.
Well, listen, the Hall of Famer, the great Paul Coffey, told EJ and I during Stanley Cup Final how impressed he was with Broberg, and that'll tell you something. So you're just echoing similar kind of thoughts. I want to ask you this, though, while we have you on. This is really important, because there's a lot of people, a lot of girls and boys that play the game. I know your wife coaches, and you played and coached and the whole thing, and you're actively coaching now. But for the young players that are playing the game, from an NHL head coach, what are some of the traits that you look at, having gone through it yourself and now being a coach? What are some of those traits you look at when you're watching tape or when you're at a game that you want to see from young players that aspire to play at a higher level?
Well, positivity, body language, I think, like just the way they carry themselves on the ice, the positivity that they bring towards their bench, their teammates. That's something that I really look for. It goes unnoticed at times, but it's also something, you know, if you have bad body language, it's something that the opposition can really feed off. You know, it's something that in young players, you know, coming up, probably don't have recognition of when things are not going their way or their teammates' way, you know, to give them a pat on the back, to help them out. And it's just being a good teammate, you know, it's very subtle, but it can go a long way in really getting your team to buy in and become a team, you know, and just that body language and that care, you know, that positivity that you bring to the rink and on the ice and on the bench and in practice is so important to really becoming a team.
Boy, I love hearing
Isn't that great?
I love hearing it because, I mean,
that's,
you know, I hope that coaches, young children, teenagers that are watching, listen to that and really hear it because it is so important. Drew, thanks for the time today, and good luck to your Blues. Like I said, we're rooting for you. You're 2-1. You start the homestand. You got the Wild coming in. Good luck during the season. Hopefully we'll get to talk to you again at some point.
Great. Thanks, EJ. Kevin, take care, guys. Thanks for having me.